What up? It's Friday, March 31st. Let's talk PlayStation. Alright, so we got kind of a lot of news stories to talk about this week. So kind of a little bit of a loaded show, so let's kind of get right into the first one. There's already sort of an early list for exhibitors for Gamescom 2017. Looks like Sony is not on the list now. They still have time to sort of sign up. But looks like a lot of the floor space is already sort of accounted for. Now, if you do remember the past like 2 or 3 years, Sony has already skipped Gamescom. They've not held a press conference there, and even more recently, as of last year, they also skipped Paris Games Week. I believe they had floor space at Paris Games Week, but they didn't hold a press conference. But either way, they have not had any sort of major presence at Paris Games Week or Gamescom, and that might be the case again this year, just a little FYI. Next up, just a little quickie. If you have a PlayStation 4 Pro, this past week you got an update for the media player. Now it does 4K video playback, not only for just standard 4K videos, but also for 3D videos. So you can do 4K videos, 4K VR video as well, which is pretty sweet. I still would love if the files could be saved locally to the hard drive, but there you go. Now moving on to a release date, we have a release date for Wipeout the Omega Collection, which is June 6th for North America and June 7th for Europe. So of course Wipeout HD, Wipeout HD Fury, and Wipeout 2048. All the tracks from those games put into a nice one big bundle. June 6th, look out for that if you are into Wipeout. Now let's talk about some God of War. We haven't really talked about God of War in a while because there isn't really a whole lot of updates going on, but just recently the voice actor for Kratos, the new voice actor for Kratos, Christopher Judge, recently updated his Twitter bio saying he's going to be in God of War Capped 2017, kind of unintentionally mentioning that the game may see a release in 2017. Kind of what that means. That's sort of implied, right? Which I find kind of surprising because, well, I mean, there's actually a lot of rumors kind of pointing towards God of War hitting 2017. But, you know, if you do remember my earlier predictions video, I had made the prediction that I don't think the game is going to hit 2017, whether it gets announced for release in 2017 or it gets delayed into 2018 or they just announce it into 2018 or whatever may be the case. I don't think the game will hit release this year. And I'm still kind of inclined to say that, considering that we are already almost in April and we don't really have more footage of the game. We don't have more details about the game. I mean, you'd think there would be a lot more pre-release for such a big heavy hitter title like God of War. So it would be kind of surprising to me if the game got a release date and came out even at this point in, let's say, holiday 2017. Even if it released by the holidays, I'd find that a little weird because you would assume that they would want to start a lot of pre-release and hype. Now would probably be the best time, right? But that's kind of just what I'm thinking. But take what he has in his Twitter bio for what it is. Now, normally we wouldn't really talk about the announcement of a third-party game, but this one is sort of particular significance, so if you didn't see it at this point, if you've been living under a rock, Destiny 2 was officially confirmed and revealed and all that jazz this past week. Big hurrah there. It's not really entirely surprising because we knew there was going to be a Destiny 2, and Activision would openly discuss Destiny 2 and its development many times during you know, shareholder meetings and things like that. But it is nice to see the official announcement, some actual real artwork and some teaser footage and things like that. All well and good. If you're a Destiny fan, I'm sure you're excited about it. What's more particular about the PlayStation side of this is that it is worth noting that once again, and unsurprisingly, Sony does have marketing rights to this game, and they will also be receiving exclusive timed content for the game. So, and apparently that's confirmed all the way up to fall 2018 when it comes to timed exclusive content for the game. And it'll, much like the original, you know, Destiny, it played a pretty major role for Sony in having a lot more gamer mind share. You know, every time you see a Destiny commercial, it'd be followed with the PlayStation symbols and, you know, Sony having their banner everywhere for this game and whatnot. And I think it's also worth mentioning that if you do not give a flying shit about Destiny, you're now going to have to put up with the fact that at Sony trade shows, all sorts of announcements, the PlayStation blog, Destiny coverage is going to be exclusively in Sony's presence. So much like when you know, and it even still holds true because Sony still has that partnership with Activision for Call of Duty. So much like that, it's going to be taking up stage time, so that's kind of shitty if you're not into Destiny. But if you're into Destiny, this benefits you anyway. But yeah, kind of a big announcement there. Now let's move on to some interesting Naughty Dog type discussion. So recently in an interview, Naughty Dog's president, Evan Wells, was discussing with Game Informer about sort of the future of Uncharted, and more specifically Uncharted The Lost Legacy and kind of what that means for the future of Uncharted, and he shared some interesting quotes I'd like to share with you all. He said, we don't plan that far ahead. Making a game is pretty tough, so we're laser focused on just getting what we're currently working on out the door. We have wrapped up Nathan Drake's story for sure. We have a lot of ideas outside of the Uncharted universe, and we're busy on The Last of Us 2 at the same time, so it's not an experiment. We don't have a grand plan to continue to do this serially or create more side stories of other characters. Now, kind of when discussing sort of how back in the day with the original Last of Us, Naughty Dog had originally tried to split up into 2 teams to concurrently work on projects, and he kind of discussed how that didn't really pan out all that well. And he says, we've now got the ability to sort of have a team that's in production and sort of a pre-production team. When one team ends, we've sort of laid the groundwork with what the next product is going to be, and then we can sort of roll people over, but we've certainly given up any dream or fantasy that we'd ever be able to fully accomplish the 2 full teams. Kind of throwing that idea out the window, right? So 2 full teams of what they had originally tried to do, not really working out for them. He kind of mentioned it as saying, like, you know, back then we kind of had 1 team and then like a quarter of a team or like a third of a team. It just really wasn't working out for them, and looks like even into the future that is not something that they're going to, that they're very keen on making work. And then when he looked at the script and the basic story outline for for The Last of Us Part 2, penned by Neil Druckmann, of course, he said that it's amazing. He totally believes in it, and people are going to be legitimately excited for it, I think. Now, there's really not a whole lot of new information to kind of pull away from this, because we kind of already know that for sure they want to sort of move on from Uncharted, especially after the Lost Legacy. And even more so, Evan Wells mentions they have a lot more ideas outside of that universe and outside of the Last of Us universe. We know that. Just like sort of the last sort of big idea they really started to look at was a new sort of sci-fi game that they started early, art for and everything, and ultimately they didn't end up going with it. But a big creative company like Naughty Dog, they have a lot of ideas brewing, but I can see how they kind of want to live in the now, especially for game developers that are always so pressed on meeting their deadlines and wrapping up projects. You really don't have a whole lot of time to think about the future when you want to get your game out now. So we've been talking a lot about GameStop the past few weeks, so why not talk about this one, because certainly it's pressing news, which is that GameStop is going to be closing 150 stores this year. This was certainly making the rounds for a lot of news outlets. Certainly noteworthy, because we had been talking about sort of their Circle of Life program, and I even openly talk about how my experience in their stores, I hate it very much. I really don't like how customers are sort of handled, and a lot of people don't really like GameStop's business practices. However, at the same time, I sort of keep discussing, this goes into the news story, right? Because that's the whole idea, right? 150 stores are being closed this year. Sure enough, a lot of people are going, oh, well, that's what you bastards get for sucking so much, and oh yeah, you guys are gonna die eventually because of digital sales and this, that, the other. It still goes back to kind of what we were discussing in the previous videos. There's still a place for GameStop. There's still a place for brick and mortar stores selling video games, because there's always going to be a place for physical media. Whether you do or do not believe that is your prerogative, but it's the truth. There's still a place for CDs, DVDs, fucking vinyl is like, for some reason, on the rise. It's the same thing we always discuss. There is always going to be a place for physical media. However, it is certainly a very real situation of how, yeah, it's not going to be nearly as big. So when I say there's always going to be a place for GameStop, there will always be a place for GameStop, but that's in terms of GameStop living and thriving in what the market sort of allows it to be alive in. And certainly if they're going to be closing 150 stores, that's 150 stores that aren't really doing all that well, which is what GameStop said. We're closing the stores that aren't really productive and don't really make a whole lot of sense. Now, we have a local store here, a local game store. There's only about, I don't even know, maybe 5, 10 of them. I really don't know, but it's a local sort of, game store. Sells retro stuff, sells new stuff. A lot of people here actually really love that place. And guess what? They're sustainable. They're alive. Yeah, it's only like how many stores? It's only a local store, but there's a place for them. So it's the same thing as GameStop. GameStop is not going to be maybe as big as it was, but if they downsize, if they, focus on some other things, like maybe bringing back and selling a lot of older games, which I believe they are doing now, as far as I remember, because again, I don't really go into GameStops anymore. You know, that's why they've kind of focused more on merchandise in recent years. I mean, you go in there now and they've got a whole damn section dedicated to t-shirts and figures and knickknacks. And I think that's cool. Some people actually don't like that. I don't know why, because it's always this sort of hate against just the corporate conglomerate. And I understand that, because GameStop certainly is one of those companies that deserves it, because, again, I'm being very vocal about it. I do not like GameStop and how they sort of handle their business. But there is that sort of biased tendency to hate GameStop because they are that conglomerate, when at the same time, you can go into some mom and pop shop that has a bunch of cool figures and t-shirts and all that, and you go, oh, this is a really cool place. And then at the same time, it's that same person goes into GameStop and says, oh, this is so stupid. Why is GameStop selling all this dumb shit now? But it's just sort of a silly tangent. But it's the truth, right? There's still a place for GameStop if they want to, you know, actually do something about it and change their sort of line of thinking and the way they approach customers and the things that they sell. And if they want to sort of scale back and understand that that's going to be their place moving forward, which is hard for a lot of companies that are that big, because at that point they just sort of dwindle and dwindle and dwindle until they just ultimately close. It's weird sometimes, because a lot of times you don't have a company that downsizes so significantly and then they just stay afloat as a small company, you know. But there is a place if they choose to do that, and the future will dictate that. Now, this last news story you can take with a very small grain of salt, one that you can barely even see. However, I am including this for one particular reason. We'll get to that in a second. But as you can already see the headline. So a Taiwanese newspaper, Digitimes, is reporting that Sony is working on an even smaller PlayStation 4. Now, in particular, the newspaper doesn't mention anything about it, which PS4 it could be, because now we could be talking about PS4 Pro or the current PS4 Slim, so they could be working on an even slimmer version of that, which that's not entirely out of the realms of impossibility, because Sony, for the first time in the PlayStation 3 generation, did another slim down. So they did PS3 Slim and then PS3, you know, quote-unquote super slim. Obviously, they revised the PSP multiple times, but a home console, mind you. They did it another time. So slimming down the PS4 Slim would be, it's not impossible, more or less. It's not something that Sony wouldn't do at this point. However, they just released the PS4 Slim. PS4 Pro is kind of a bulky unit. So yeah, I think it would be more on PS4 Pro side of possibly, you know, the reason why I'm even mentioning this, because again, this seems like kind of a bullshit news story. However, I'm including it because every single time we learn about a slim PlayStation 4, it comes from the East. And it comes from the most mundane, wacko sources where you wouldn't even think it'd be true. We get these weird, blurry pictures of, like, who knows what the... You know what I'm saying? And they, as far as I know, every time they've been actually correct. So, this small little inkling detail that Sony is working on something could eventually lead to it being the truth. And realistically, I mean, I could say that right now, and it will probably end up being the truth, because let's face it, Sony loves to slim down their hardware, so anybody saying that, hey, Sony's going to release a slimmer PS4 down the road, they're probably right. But yeah, the discussion could be that, yeah, it'd probably be PS4 Pro at that point. To slim down the current PS4 even more, well, I'm sure they could easily do in the next 2-3 years. I don't think they necessarily have to, because we've got another model that could easily use some slimming down. And you'd have to imagine at that point they'd also release it with a price drop or something. But I wouldn't expect that anytime soon. They're saying working on it, so that would mean early, you know, R&D of actually doing it. So you could maybe expect it 2018 if they were to actually release it. But yeah, there's that. And those are all the news stories I have for you guys this week. It's funny, I started recording this, right? Did a few news stories, and then I just looked at my computer real quick, and I saved like one of the voiceovers, because I kind of film this in like 2 or 3 clips depending on how long the episode goes. And I started to make the folder, and I was like, oh shit, wait a minute, yeah, it's episode 250. I didn't even acknowledge it in the beginning of the episode, and I remember last week I acknowledged it, like, hey, next week's 250. So yeah, this is let's talk PlayStation 250. Done this 250 Fridays in a row, haven't missed one. Hope you all enjoyed them over the past how many years? I even told you last week, nothing special or anything like that, but I always find it a little crazy that I've been doing this for as long as I've been doing it. If it wasn't blatantly obvious, thank you all so much. You know I love you like crazy. You and me, I mean, we're basically like this. And if we're not like, say we're like this, then let me know, and I'll make us like this. If you know what I'm saying. Oh, fuck, I'm weird, dude. That concludes this week's episode of Let's Talk PlayStation. I'm Ryan Benecki. Thank you all so much for talking with me, and I will see you guys next Friday. What up? It's Friday, March 30th. What up? It's March. Alright, we got some news stories to talk about, so let's get to it.